Her cry did not sound like it belonged to any living creature. It sliced through the thick Kansas heat, like something being torn apart. When Elias Boone pushed open the stall door at the Miller Ranch, he did not see the horse he had come to purchase. Instead, he saw a young woman lying on the dirt floor, shaking so violently that the straw beneath her quivered like dry grass under a sudden gust. Her legs were stretched wide, locked in a position she kept fighting to close. Every attempt sent a shock of agony through her body, so sharp she let out another choked scream. Elias stopped cold. He had witnessed battlefield injuries, shattered limbs, and men barely hanging on by prayer alone. But he had never seen a woman in this kind of torment, alone, abandoned in a silent barn. While the sunlight outside carried on as though nothing inside was breaking, she tried lifting herself on one elbow. Her voice cracked, brittle as old timber. She whispered, "I can't bring my legs together." Then she cried out again, not from embarrassment, but from a pain rooted so deep it lived in every breath she drew. Elias dropped to one knee beside her. He didn't touch her, not yet. He didn't want to frighten her further. He saw bruises along the insides of her thighs, angry red swelling where the skin had been rubbed raw, and faded rope burns around her ankles, evidence that someone had forced her body open long enough to tear her apart. She tried, covering her legs with trembling hands. Please don't leave me. It hurts. I can't move." A heavy weight settled in Elias's chest. This had not been an accident, not a fall. This was deliberate cruelty. Cruelty inflicted slowly. Cruelty done by someone meant to protect her. He placed his hat on the ground and spoke gently. "Ma'am, my name is Elias. I won't harm you. Let me see what's wrong so I can help." She gave a barely there nod. Her voice fell to a ghost of itself. "My name is Hannah. Please, sir, take me away. Please." Elias leaned closer, careful and steady. He reached to support her leg, just enough to look for bleeding. The moment his hand brushed her skin, Hannah cried out and clutched his shirt with both hands, her fingers digging like someone drowning, clinging to anything solid. He realized then she had been lying there for hours, maybe far longer. Heat radiated from her swollen skin. The kind of fever that meant infection had already begun its work. Elias Boone was not the kind of man who turned from suffering. He never had, and he wasn't going to begin with her. He glanced toward the ranch house. Empty. No sign of the husband she had spoken of. No sign of anyone who cared if she lived or died. He turned back to her. "Hannah, I'm getting you out of here. I promise." Her eyes opened wider, filled with fear and hope battling for space. She asked, voice trembling, "Sir, if you help me now, will danger come to you too?" And Elias felt the weight of that question settle over him like rolling thunder, because he already knew the truth. Yes, danger was coming. "So, let me ask you this. If you stood in that barn with a woman begging for her life and a violent man sure to return, would you save her too?" Hannah clung to Elias as though he were the last steady thing in a collapsing world. Her breaths came in short, broken bursts, and every time she tried to draw her legs inward, she hissed in raw pain. Elias could see she couldn't remain in that barn another minute. So he slid one arm beneath her shoulders, the other under her knees, and lifted her as carefully as a man his age could. She gasped, not from fear, but from sheer relief. He carried her into the blazing Kansas sunlight, her head resting against his chest, her fingers still knotted in his shirt. For a moment she blinked at the open prairie, as if she had forgotten what the world looked like beyond that dark, suffocating stall. The warm summer wind touched her face, and the simple feeling of air made her start crying again, soft and trembling. Elias placed her onto his horse, steadying her as she tried to sit, without letting her legs brush anything. "Easy now. I got you." His voice was steady, the kind carved from years of hard living. She looked down at him. Her eyes were frightened, but something else flickered inside them too. Something tiny. Something trying to crawl back to life. Hope. He swung onto the saddle behind her, supporting her with both arms so she wouldn't fall. With every hoofbeat, Hannah breathed a little deeper. Every jolt of the trail made her wince, but she never complained. Not once. She leaned her head back against his shoulder and whispered, "You really are taking me away." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. and we're not turning back. The ride lasted hours, long enough for the sun to slip west and cast golden light across the plains. Elias talked now and then, simple things, weather, land, stories about colts he used to break in his younger years. Nothing heavy, nothing that made her shrink or curl into herself. Just enough to keep her awake, enough to keep the fear from crawling too high up her spine. By the time Boone Ranch came into sight, Hannah was trembling from exhaustion. The white fences, the red barn doors, the distant cattle calls, they looked unreal to her, like she had stepped into someone else's world, a world where the air didn't hurt, and voices didn't strike like fists. Elias lifted her off the horse, carried her inside, and called for old Mrs. Harper, the housekeeper. He told her to bring warm water and clean linens. Hannah tried to apologize for being trouble. He shook his head. "No, ma'am, not a bit." He said it so simply she believed him, something she hadn't done with any man in years. She let herself rest, but as her eyes drifted closed, one thought tore its way through her mind. Her husband, Caleb, he would come. So here's the real question. What does a cruel man do when he discovers the woman he tormented has escaped? And what will Elias do when that man walks onto Boone Ranch? Ready for a fight? Hannah had barely been at Boone Ranch for 2 days when trouble finally arrived. Elias noticed the dust first, a thin, rising trail stretching over the fence line. Riders moving fast, and not the kind who came to shake hands. Inside the house, Hannah was resting, propped up on pillows Mrs. Harper had stuffed with fresh cotton. So Elias slipped outside quietly and pulled the door shut behind him, not wanting her to hear the angry shouts drifting toward the ranch. Caleb Miller rode straight into the yard like a man marching into territory he believed belonged to him. He jerked his horse to a halt, pointed a trembling finger at Elias, and barked, "Bring my wife out here. Now!" The words cracked through the air like a whip. Elias didn't flinch. He'd been a working cowboy since he was 15, and loud men never rattled him much. But the way Caleb's eyes blazed, the way he spit out the word wife as if it meant ownership, that lit something hot and dangerous in Elias's chest. Caleb jumped off his horse and stormed toward him. "You took her. You stole her from me. I'm dragging her back myself." Elias kept his voice level. "She's hurt. She's scared. And she left because she chose to." Caleb's lip curled. "Chose? That woman belongs to me. She does what I tell her." That was the line Elias didn't let anyone cross. He stepped forward. "Not today. Not anymore." Caleb shoved him. Elias shoved back harder. Caleb swung first, wild and sloppy, catching Elias under the eye and splitting the skin. Elias staggered, vision clouding. Before the hired hands could swarm in behind Caleb, one of the ranch cowboys burst out from the barn, yelling that Elias wasn't standing alone today. That was all it took for the whole yard to erupt. Caleb lunged again, all fury and no aim, while his hired men charged after him. Elias ducked and grabbed Caleb by the front of his shirt, slamming him hard against the water trough. The hired hands piled in, but Elias and the ranch hand fought like men who'd spent years working with their bodies. Strength carved by labor, not by temper. Elias hurled one man to the dirt. The ranch cowboy yanked another back by the collar with enough force to make him cry out. Then Elias turned back to Caleb, who was scrambling up like a furious rooster ready to fight the wind itself. Elias seized him by the front of his coat. "If you come near her again, you bring a preacher. And your last words." Caleb stumbled backward, shaking with rage but too afraid to challenge him again. He spat on the ground, mounted his horse, and rode off screaming that this wasn't finished. Elias stood in the settling dust, chest rising and falling, knowing all too well the fight was only beginning. Inside, behind the closed door, Hannah had heard enough to start trembling again, but this time it wasn't fear alone. It was something unfamiliar. Someone had finally stepped between her and the man who harmed her. But storms didn't end just because a man rode away. And the real storm, everyone knew, was heading straight for Boone Ranch. Caleb left that afternoon, but the dust he kicked up never truly settled. Elias felt it. Hannah felt it too. The air felt heavy that night, as if the entire ranch were holding its breath. Elias sat at the kitchen table with a mug of black coffee, staring at the wall like the right decision might be hiding in the grain of the wood. But all he could think about was Hannah resting in the spare room. Finally warm, finally safe, and how quickly all of that could vanish if Caleb returned with the law on his side. At last Elias pushed back on the table, grabbed his hat, and said, "Mrs. Harper, stay with her. I need to talk to an old friend." The ride to Dodge City took barely an hour. Elias was pushing his horse too hard, too fast for a man his age. But worry can turn any horse into a lightning bolt. The sun was dipping low when he tied his reins outside the sheriff's office. Inside, Sheriff Cole Harding sat behind a desk buried under paperwork he definitely wasn't reading. He looked up the moment Elias stepped in. "Well, Boone, that's a face I only see when trouble's sitting on your back. Sit down before you fall over." Elias sat, but his jaw didn't loosen. He told Cole everything. Every bruise he saw on her, every word Caleb had spat, every detail burned into his mind. Cole leaned back, chewing the inside of his cheek, the way he always did when he was trying not to lose his temper. "Elias, what that man did is a crime. Plain and simple. But you know as well as I do that the law out here don't always run how it's supposed to." "I know," Elias said quietly, "but I'm not sending her back. Not while I'm breathing." Cole nodded slowly. "All right, then, we do this right. We get the doctor to write a statement. We find anyone in Abilene who ever saw Caleb raise a hand to her. And when she's strong enough, we bring Hannah in to speak. Then we take it to Judge Wilbur before Caleb gets there first." For the first time that day, Elias felt a little weight slide off his shoulders. Not gone, but lighter. He stood, shook Cole's hand, and the sheriff said, "Bring her tomorrow. I'll see the judge hears it." Tomorrow never arrived. The judge delayed the hearing, claiming he needed more witnesses, more proof, more proper statements. For 2 long weeks, Elias rode between Abilene and Dodge City, talking to neighbors, collecting letters, persuading the doctor to visit twice and record everything. Every night Hannah asked if there was progress, and every night Elias told her, "Hold on, just a bit longer." When he stepped outside the sheriff's office, the sky was turning violet, and the lamps along Front Street flickered awake. Back at Boone Ranch, Hannah sat up waiting, hands twisted together. "Is he coming for me?" she whispered. Elias knew he had to tell her the truth. This fight was only beginning. So here's the question. What happens when a judge in Dodge City must choose between a cruel husband and the woman brave enough to stand against him? On the morning of the hearing, the courthouse felt colder than any winter Hannah had ever lived through. She sat beside Elias, hands folded tight, breath trembling like a leaf fighting to stay still. The doctor testified first, then a shopkeeper from Abilene, then a neighbor who once saw Caleb screaming, so loud the chickens scattered. Caleb himself didn't show. The law still hadn't touched him. Finally, it was Hannah's turn. She rose slowly, unsteady on her feet, but her voice was clear enough to fill the room. She didn't speak about pain. She didn't describe the worst nights. She spoke about wanting peace, wanting safety, wanting to close her eyes at night without fear. When she finished, even Judge Wilbur sat silent for a long moment before clearing his throat. Then he delivered the ruling that changed her life. Hannah Miller was granted a temporary order of protection, keeping Caleb away from her and from Boone Ranch. A full hearing would be scheduled in the coming weeks. Once more witnesses stepped forward, and the lawmen finally had the chance to hunt Caleb down. It wasn't the ultimate victory, but it marked the first true stride toward one. The whole place seemed brighter, lighter, almost sacred. Hannah eased into a chair, and the breath she released was the first unchained breath she'd taken in years. Elias glanced at her, and she met his eyes, and nothing needed to be spoken. Some moments speak everything, without a single sound. Months drifted by. Hannah worked in the kitchen, then in the garden, then by the horses once. Her strength returned, and each evening Elias caught himself, watching her laugh with Mrs. Harper, or hearing her hum softly as she folded laundry, and he understood something. Quiet yet steady. She was mending, and so was he. One brisk dawn, Hannah rose. Early, faint and lightheaded, and Mrs. Harper smiled the way only older women do when they already know the truth. Later that day, the doctor confirmed it. Hannah was expecting a child. When she told Elias, he went rigid. Then he dropped into a chair like someone had stolen the air from his lungs. She feared he was troubled, but then he laughed under his breath, brushed his eyes, and said, "Well, I'll be. Just look at that. Life still finds a way." For Hannah, it was more than a baby. It was proof she'd never been truly shattered. Proof that kindness nurtures what cruelty never could. Far out on the prairie, Caleb eventually heard that Hannah carried a child. He stopped cold, shocked she could conceive after all. Then his features curled, part regret, part raw rage, as he whispered this wasn't the end. And for the first time in years, she felt deserving of love. Real love, gentle love, the kind that remains. Now, let me ask you this. If you had stood in Elias Boone's place, would you have found the courage to act when everyone else stayed silent? And if you had been Hannah, would you have dared to begin again when the world insisted you couldn't? If this tale stirred you even a little, tap that like. It helps far more than you know. And go on, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story waiting along this dusty old trail. Pour yourself another warm drink, get comfortable, and tell me, where are you watching from tonight?